Hello everyone, welcome to another video from Fantasy Football Scout. My name is Az, and it's a bit of a role reversal today because rather than Joe interviewing people, doing these team reveals, doing all the prep for the Scoutcast, it's me in charge. Does it feel weird, Joe?
It is. It's good. I don't have to press any buttons. Well, I had
No.
to press the button on, to talk to you, but that's it. I don't have to do anything else. It's
No,
quite nice.
you can just sit back, relax, and talk to us about your team.
Mm.
Yeah. So, how you doing? Final few days before the beginning of the season. You feeling good?
Yeah, I'm okay. Actually, it's weird, isn't it? Because when I've got the first draft of my team that I made half an hour before. Just after the deadline, when the game launched. So I thought, whoa, I'll just go for it. And then just made that team. So I put that up on my Twitter feed as a pinned post. And I keep looking at it every now and again. To remind myself.
Yeah.
And you can see over summer how we evolve. We go from not really knowing what to do. So you're sort of leaving it. And then you start to get these drips of information. Then you get the injuries kick in. And then suddenly those plans go and they alter. And this, with 1 week to go, I felt last weekend's Monday, around about the time we did the Scoutcast, I was pretty settled with a nice structure. And I think hopefully something we'll talk about here is I talk about price points a lot, but I also like those towards the start of the season because it makes it much easier to react to news. So, for example, an injury to Robertson at Liverpool, for example, or perhaps the emergence of a definitely more nailed on 7.5 midfielder. So if you've got that slot, you can easily move them around. You can hop around then. So I'm settled basically.
So definitely no 4 million defenders for you then, right?
Yeah. but what I'm not doing is thinking a 4 million defender can cover Alexander-Arnold, which I've seen saying, oh yes, that can happen. No, that can't. But I do think a 4 million defender can cover perhaps another 4 million defender who I might have had in my team.
Interesting. I wonder who you could be talking about. Well, we're going to see a team in a sec. Just before we do that, I want to just go through a few kind of broader things. Firstly, I've got your rank history on the screen. I've got to say, lots of people, I don't want to give you too much credit. I mean, I've known you for years. I like to give you a bit of banter and a bit of stick and all that. But we have people on the stream, they've got, top 100 finishes. We've had Simon with his top 1K. I don't know if there's anyone with a record quite like yours, which is... it's 13 years of playing, never finished outside the top 100,000. And then within that, you've got sort of multiple top 5K finishes. You've got a top 1K finish in 2013-14. And it's the last two seasons really that have been your kind of weakest two, but you've just about managed to scrape in to the top 100K. I mean, you've got to be proud of this, right? It's pretty impressive.
Yeah, I mean, it's the minimum goal is to be top 100K. Yeah. To preserve that record is rare because a lot of people start playing when they were much younger. So I started playing when I was a bit older. So I was of an age, and so I wasn't like at school or something. So I did sort of take it a bit more seriously. So my first ever season, I got 59,000. So there was only 2 million people playing then. But then you can see when I discovered Fantasy Football Scout 2009-10, I got 11,000 finish. And that was when I got hooked. And I thought, hang on a minute, with a bit of prep, you can do okay here. And then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 top 10,000 finishes in a row. Then followed, and then it sort of went a bit awry back into the top 2K.
But I mean, awry. I mean, an 82,000 finish still isn't a bad.
Disaster. I mentioned on the Scoutcast as well. My last two finishes have been almost identical at 93K, and the 2019 one was really frustrating because I was top 50K for a lot of that season. I could just never pushed on and just kept slumping a bit. But the following year, I was 4 million at one point. And so to get top 100K, that became a genuine hard ambition to get. So I was really pleased with that. And I look back on that history and it is the last year's 93K that I'm most proud of because of where it came from.
Well, it's quite interesting because I mean, you and I obviously did the Scoutcast for years together. I think we had a kind of a bit of a rivalry, a bit of a friendly rivalry. I mean, 2017-18 was my best season. I finished 800th. I remember that season because I was so far ahead of everyone in like the Mods and Cons League, and just gradually you chipped away, and you overtook me at one point. And I think you got into the top 1K or just outside the top 1K, and I fell out. And I just about managed to claw my way back in, and you were just outside. But last year we had another rivalry, but at a completely different end of the table, because we were both, 2 million, 2.5 million, about 10 or 11 game weeks in.
Yeah, I know.
And somehow you managed to get into the top 100K, and I just missed out. So it was different seasons, but kind of a similar.
Well, I think when you get to that stage, it's like if you're in the top 10K and you want to stay there but don't want to leave it. There's certain things you can do, which is to look at things like overall ownership, effective ownership, who people are going to captain. And I looked at that. My ambition in that final game week, nothing risky, was about 89K or something, 90K. It was just get above average. Consolidate that. Nothing too fancy, but just get an above average score, and that's how it happened. So quite pleased with that.
So Kudos in the chat says he thinks the top 100K is the new top 10K. I was going to ask because I mean, if you look at sort of 2010 down to 2015, or maybe even stretching it to 2017, most of your finishes there are in the top 10,000. Then the last three have been outside of the top 10,000. Obviously, the game's got harder. There's more people using stats. There's more people looking at things. But do you still see top 10K as the target, as the minimum target that you'd be happy with?
As a target, but not the minimum target, definitely. So looking at those seasons, so 2016, I got 82K. Which I'm still pleased with, because that was once again clawing back a terrible start. But then the following year, suddenly I'm on the edge of the top 1,000. It's definitely well within the top 2,000. So that was just a year after that. And then the following year, my brain exploded. So I think I was on course for top 10K that year, but I physically just couldn't manage my team. And so the last few game weeks, and I already know various moves that I could have done and would have done. And people say woulda, coulda, shoulda, but I mean, I definitely wanted to captain certain players or use my triple captainship, but I just couldn't press the button. So I'm quite pleased getting 22K then. So I still think that was achievable that year. And it was the last 2 years have been tricky. And I think the last 2 years have been a proliferation of so many people. I mean, we're chatting here on a podcast, on a video, and how many other people are doing that? And it's a hobby to some people. It's a job to some people. And there's so many people doing that. There's so many people watching those things. There's so many people just sharing their knowledge and getting more each, almost on a daily basis. I'm looking at something else on Twitter and go, wow, that's an even deeper understanding of the game that I never even considered.
Absolutely. I mean, anecdotally, I've got friends who are the definition of casuals over the last 10 seasons. But last season, I saw them reading more stuff, taking it more seriously, watching games of football and looking for fantasy potential rather than just watching a game of football. And these are the kind of guys who I would have beaten comfortably sort of 3 or 4 years ago. Now they're a threat, right? Because they've got this extra motivation to try and do well. It's reached that kind of level now where people just want to do well, and a lot of people don't just see it as something a bit of fun. They want to win.
Definitely. I mean, one of the main ways that those that follow the game a lot can move up the rankings is don't blow your chips early. Use them strategically. Follow what's happening with the fixtures, the way they're panning out, and just sort of move your team around that. Don't take too many hits. So what I'm not seeing now is people just splurging loads of hits, using their triple captaincy in the first game week. They're being really clever, and they're being patient and consolidating. What
planning ahead is what I'm seeing more. Normally, you'd have people who'd make a transfer for 1 week, or they'd make a transfer based on one player scoring heavily in the last week. I always think of Lee Cattermole. Game week 1, Lee Cattermole scores, his ownership rockets like 25-30%. I just think we see less of that now, less reactive stuff and more kind of preparation. Obviously, you still get a chunk of that, but I think it's much less now than it used to be.
Yeah, definitely. So it is more difficult because you've got more competitors. I remember one of my Meet the Manager videos, I mean, there's often a line from each of those Meet the Manager videos that I sort of take with me. And I think it was Mark Rubinstein. I think it was Mark who, so he used a lot of sort of investment banking and city sort of analysis within fantasy football management. And he was just talking about just the sheer numbers, really, just the sheer odds and the sheer, if you've got more people who are more knowledgeable investing in a player, that makes it more difficult. You've got more competitors in a way. So yeah, going back to the original question, that was a long rambling way. The original question, I personally I think top 10k is great, and I think it's even better now. But I think top 50k would be a more realistic comparison, I think, because you're looking at 4 to 5 times as many players as they were perhaps a few years back when there were only 2 million people playing. So what we get up to 8 million now. So I think 50k is really good, and I think 100k is good as well. And I think it's just then a sort of a sliding scale downwards. But it's perfectly possible just by a couple of moves different to have pretty much 2 very similar managers, having that, being, what's the difference between 80 and 90k, 90 and 110k, 110k and 120k? There's not a tremendous amount of difference. And it's the same when you get in the top 1,000. So I had a rank of 800 or something. So say I've got 700, say I've got 900. I mean, that's a captaincy call. Not even that. That's probably a subbing, having the first sub not being as good as the second sub or something. So it's very marginal.
It's surprising how often it comes down to fine margins like that. I mean, the biggest mini league win I had back when cash leagues were allowed, I won by 1 point. And you think an entire season that comes down to, it came down to a bonus point for Vardy being taken away in the last, after the game had finished. It's crazy. So just before we come to your team, I just wanted to ask you one other question. So in terms of general strategy, you've got a reputation as being this kind of dullard, boring manager. I've always thought that, I've always obviously played on that talking to you, but I've always thought it's quite a harsh thing to do, because you do a lot of research. You've got a good knowledge of football, and you pick players and they go on and do well. But how much of that do you think is true? How much do you try and be safe and boring? I mean, I never hear you talk about effective ownership really as being a thing for your decision making. So although you might call yourself a dullard, it's not based on that. So what exactly is your kind of style?
Well, I mean, I play up to it mainly because being a content creator, you sort of have to create an image, persona of yourself. So, I was jokingly saying on the Scoutcast about Seb, all you're good for is stats and things. Obviously, it's much more, but it's creating a persona that he's really, really into stats.
He is really, really into stats.
He really, really is into stats, but he does other things in his life. And
modelling for a start. Look at his picture.
He's modelling, getting putting me and Andy to shame with his photos on the site. But yeah, we are. So I do play up to that a bit, but no, I'm not, because I'm not in the another Meet the Manager again of Ross, who's just written the Mind Game, and I did some tests in there about whether basically you can do a test in that book. Are you a dullard or are you maverick? And I came sort of in the middle, and more or less it's I think it was Apple Bonkers who coined the phrase dullardinho. So it's like you're dullards, you're sensible, but occasionally you'll do a flair move. And Tom Freeman in the Meet the Manager video, I'm full of these Meet the Manager video quotes, but one of the things he does is have the fourth midfielder as the sort of flair pick, the sort of why not get Theo Walcott in type pick, and I sort of follow that mentality as well. And I think I don't mess around with the heavy hitters too much, but I do think there is scope to be a bit maverick with certain choices, certain decisions, and you can have a team that is that mix of the old swords and shields, but you need that mix, and so you can't be completely dullard and do well, and you can't be completely maverick and do well. You have to have a bit of both. Say late riser, one of our pro pundits, always known as a maverick, flair player, and he does make those moves, and he will do that for the big premium players and the captaincy and stuff. But he's also a very sensible manager. He does his research. He doesn't just sit there on a whim and just go, I'm just going to get that guy in. It's quite considered, and would be arguably dullard in that respect of his game as well as being maverick. But yeah, we all play to our personas.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I know from doing the Scoutcast with you, you occasionally going, I'm getting him because I really like him, or I'm getting him in because I've seen him do this thing, and these stats tables suggest that he's going to bang, or the fixture's going to be good. I think your consistency comes from, I think of kind of most of the managers I know, you're the one who I think is the least sort of able to be influenced by a lot of the stuff. I mean, a lot of the people I talk about on Twitter and seeing Twitter templates and stuff, I think you're very good at filtering out that kind of stuff and making your own decisions. And sometimes they come across as boring or dullard, but it's often because they're the sensible things to do, right?
I think more and more people will get like that, because it's basically just filtering down. It's compartmentalizing bits, filtering down, sorting out quickly what's relevant and good and what isn't. And so, for example, is a 4.0 Liverpool defender coverage for Alexander Arnold? I've seen people genuinely say that this week.
Yep.
I will either press the mute button or I will ignore. There's no way that's going to happen in my world. Like you, Joe. But however, if they say, oh, Robertson or Alexander Arnold, say Robertson was fit and not injured, having both of them, that becomes a more sensible discussion to have. But to try and be different, and you're seeing it a lot with a few days to go, people are panicking, and I'm starting to see some weird stuff. And it's just filter that out. Get rid of it.
It's tricky though, isn't it? I mean, I read a brilliant thread yesterday evening, which Mark and I are going to talk about on Black Box tonight, which was about Ivan Toney and promoted teams and how their kind of regression when they get promoted.
Yeah.
And that's the kind of thread that I read, and I think I could choose to ignore this, and I could, just pretend, no, I think Toney's a great pick, but realistically, I don't know too much about him. I didn't know these stats before going in. And it's the kind of thread that I want to pay attention to and learn from. But then also you've got the other people who will just post saying, I've got Tsimikas in, and then you see loads of it, no real reasoning or rationale behind it. And you have that hive mind of just thinking, I want to get him in. So I think that it's really important, isn't it, to be able to distill your own information. And that's how you do well, because it's not about copying people, but it's about learning what you should and shouldn't listen to.
And we have to be careful of confirmation bias. We might have going back to Ross's Meet the Manager again, or having a sort of an anchor opinion and not moving away from it. So, we have to be careful with that. So Toney is a good point there, because the reality is probably like most things, it's not black and white, it's quite grey. Will Brentford regress because they're now in the top flight compared to the championship? Yes. Will Toney be the talisman for Brentford? Yes. Are promoted sides more confident when they're back, especially at home, when they're back or in the top flight for the first time, and they've got fans there going absolutely mad because their fans are seeing them play against Man City and Liverpool each week, that type of team. So, and we've seen that before with Pukki. We saw that with Bamford. So there is also that argument as well. So the reality is, will Toney be worse than he was in the Championship? Yes. Will he be a good FPL asset? Could be.
Could be. Nice sitting on the fence there. I feel the same though. I mean, I think it's very easy to get drawn into like a hype about a player. I think Toney has been a perfect example of a player who I can't ever remember a promoted striker being as hyped up as Toney. I mean, you compare that to Bamford and Watkins last season. I mean, no one was considering them at all. And I mean, Watkins had just come off the back of an absolutely brilliant season. But no one was really talking about them, and I wonder if the Toney hype has been driven by not only the brilliant season, but also because people realise what Bamford and Watkins did last year, and hoping that he can kind of emulate that.
Ebanks Blake, that's it. Ebanks Blake, those who've been playing a long time, came up with Wolves, amazing stats in the Championship, incredible striker in Championship level, came up, well, never happened. As a Brighton fan.
I always use Mopay as an example.
Yeah, Mopay.
Got 25 goals, I think.
Going back in the 70s and 80s, Peter Ward, was great at a certain level. But when he was with Brighton and came up, yes, he was good in the top flight. Moved around a bit, sort of fell down. So we're used to seeing teams come up to the top flight level. Sometimes their strikers do well. Sometimes they sort of wane a bit. And sometimes they don't. Sometimes they're Ebanks Blake.
Yeah, and I think people forget as well. It's often to do with the service that comes to that striker. So I think when teams learn how to stop balls getting put to Pukki's dried up because he wasn't getting the chances. And I think Toney is of that kind of similar mould. He's very good at getting in positions. Got a great goal, great shot on him. But if he doesn't get the ball, how he can't do anything with it. So it's going to be really interesting to see how the other players sort of adapt as well, not just him.
Definitely, but I like his price. I like what he's got to offer, but I don't know whether he'll even start. I hope he does. It's been indicated by the manager.
I'm sure he will, even if he's got one leg. I think he's that kind of player who's just going to play every minute. We're going to talk about a bit more Toney in a minute. Let's come on to your team. Not keep the suspense going. So your team, fairly template, fairly dullard, Joe. Sanchez in goal. We've got Trent, we've got Shaw, and we've got Tsimikas. We've got Salah, Greenwood, Fernandes and Barnes, and we've got Antonio, Ings and Toney. So I'd say with this, you've probably got maybe 3 players. I mean, Barnes is featuring in quite a few teams, but I think his ownership's going to be pretty low. Greenwood's an interesting one, and we talk about him because I had Oscar on the team reveal yesterday, and he's gone for Jota, who obviously you can't go for because you've got Tsimikas, and then you're starting Tsimikas with the bench. So we're starting at the back. So we're both Brighton fans. Sanchez is the most popular goalkeeper going into the new season. How comfortable are that with you? Are you comfortable with that? Do you think Brighton are gonna do well this year?
No, I'm not. I'm not comfortable at all with that. Basically, what I'm not comfortable with is spending a lot of money on goalkeepers. Yeah, my traditional ideal is 2 4.5s. And the reason I usually go for 2 4.5s is because it's not because of rotation. That's another thing people think. They go, oh, it's going to rotate. But I don't think of it as rotation. I start from the proviso that I'm probably wrong. So say back to my original draft that I made as soon as the game launched, I had Sanchez and Dubravka in. Say I'm wrong with Sanchez. Dubravka would come in. He's got injured now. But I really like 4.5 goalkeepers. And my ideal with this team is Sanchez and Bachmann. And coincidentally, Sanchez and Steele sounds like a paranormal detective duo from the 1970s. And Bachmann and Foster sounds like Bachmann Foster Overdrive, which also sounds like, I don't know, pop star 70s detective thing. So these are great combinations. They sound it. But what I really want is to mix them up and have Sanchez and Bachmann. And I think Bachmann's going to do well. I also think, is it Raya, the Brentford goalkeeper? So I know very little about them, but I was having a look at his stats and he was pretty good. And he could fulfill that role of like getting the save points, getting the bonus. Who else is going to do it? Toney, but who else with Brentford? Yeah. So I just like to. And traditionally, when I've done better with the goalkeepers, I've had something like the Bournemouth and Southampton goalkeepers together, or something like that, and just go with the form. If the Southampton's goalkeeper's in form, just keep them in, and the same with the Bournemouth one. And so, yeah, I've gone for this one. This is 0.0 in the bank. Yeah. So if I had 0.5, I'd be tempted to spend it to upgrade Steele to Bachmann. I don't want to play Bachmann against Ings in the first game week, but I'm happy to play Bachmann the following game week. Sanchez, I haven't got any Burnley attackers, so Sanchez.
So you try and avoid clashes where you can, rather than
definitely, because you're okay. You're in. If you avoid clashes, you're in with a chance of maximising your points.
That's how I look at it as well.
But if you don't, then you're definitely not in with a chance. So at least I've given myself some hope there.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. And I mean, it's interesting the way you talk about rotated goalkeepers, because it's never a tactic that's worked for me. I've tried it before. I've tried 5 million goalkeepers and that has never worked. I've tried going a bit more expensive. That rarely works out. I always settle on a 4.5 goalkeeper and just try and find the gem. And I think you're right. I think it's between Sanchez and Bachmann. I think a few people in the chat are mentioning Guaita, the Crystal Palace goalkeeper, as well. Historically makes loads of saves. I mean, even someone like Dubravka at Newcastle. Like, these are guys that make tons of saves, right?
Injured, Darlow, injured. I was gunning for Newcastle's goalkeeper. Good goalkeepers in bad defences. Absolute my dream. David James. That's what I said. David James at Portsmouth. That's my benchmark of a goalkeeper in FPL.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm on board with Sanchez. So then in defence, you've got Trent and Shaw. I mean, I don't think we need to say too many things. I mean, you can listen to basically any Meet the Manager video that you've done or any team reveal to talk about those two. I'll say again, I haven't got Shaw. I haven't had him in any of my drafts. Not because I think he's a bad pick. I've just tried to take a little bit more money out of defence. And if I was gonna go for someone in that price bracket, I'd probably go for Chilwell or Cancelo and pay a little bit more. But I still think 50% ownership he's climbing up to now, so he's a bit of a concern. But we don't make decisions based on EO here. Tsimikas, though, so we've got to talk about him. So obviously we had a bit of news today. We had some rumours that Milner's going to start. Milner has played every pre-season game in midfield.
Yes.
Liverpool have some injuries there. We're not really sure who's fit. There's talks that, what's his name? Harvey Elliott might come in and players like that. But realistically, I think if Milner starts, he's going to be at midfield. I think Tsimikas he's had a brilliant pre-season. I think he's pretty much nailed for the first couple of games at least. You've got him. Talk to me a bit about him, because he's not a player who I would have thought you'd go for, because I thought you talk about flexibility. It does stop you moving for the likes of Jota, for example, from Greenwood to Jota a bit later on, if you wanted to. Are you a bit worried you're going to be locked into that for the foreseeable, or are you not too concerned?
No, because my tentative plan is probably wildcard somewhere between 5 and 7, game weeks 5 and 7. So game week 4, so I've got Fernandes in my team, so we'll come to him in a bit later. But one of the reasons there is that when I look at game week 4's captaincy, I'd be looking at I think Manchester United at home to Newcastle. That's the one. I think that's the fixture to go for that particular game week. So that's why I've got Fernandes in. Obviously Salah, very captainable for those first ones. But then when you look at game weeks 1 to 4, you've got Brighton, Villa, Everton, Manchester United, West Ham, Liverpool. You've got these sorts of players. I don't know if I want Jota in particular, just to go back to him. But then in game week 5, it's time to mix it up a bit. And that's when Norwich, Leeds, Newcastle, Wolves suddenly have the best fixtures. So suddenly those cheap players can be moved around. And then Chelsea are starting to get in. So they've got Tottenham and City game weeks 5 and 6. It's game week 7. They got this amazing run that starts with Southampton at home. So Lukaku going to go there, not available yet. So he's not going to be available for a week or two, we think. So what we're looking at there is Lukaku being a must-to-have. And I think no matter how much people look at it and say, I'm going to plan this, I'm going to do this in terms of particular moves, getting Lukaku in, and with the possibility of Kane at City, or definitely with De Bruyne perhaps as an option at City, and then perhaps Sancho in the running as well. Perhaps we'll know a bit more about Martial and Greenwood, and maybe, I don't know if Rashford's going to be even back by then. I doubt it. And then it says wildcard to me. That's a hell of a lot of decisions to make. And there's a hell of a lot of cheap players that need to be moved around. And I haven't even mentioned the fact that Arsenal have suddenly got, from game week 4 onwards, great fixtures. So suddenly I'm going to want more Arsenal players. I've already got Ben White on my bench. But if Tammy Abraham goes there instead of Roma, now he's agreed personal terms with Arsenal, apparently.
According to TalkSport, which I have my real doubts about.
But Chelsea have been gunning for him to go to Roma. So I think they've got a deal there. I think, reading between the lines, Tammy Abraham wants to stay in London. That's where his friends and family are. That's where the club, most clubs he's been at.
And Mourinho as well. Is that really the kind of guy that you want to go and play for?
What young player who's fit and athletic wants to go and basically say, I tell you what, I'd like to really be demoralised and fat. I'll tell you what I'm going to do. I'm going to move to team with Mourinho as boss. We saw what happened with Lukaku. Jesus.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, you talk about your strategy and your wild card. I mean, you've gone hard on Liverpool and United here. I mean, you've got 6 players from so over half your team is United and Liverpool. And I guess that's to tap into the good starts they've both got, right? Because the first, 6 or 7 weeks are fantastic for both sides. Are you a little bit worried that if one of those 2 teams doesn't start strongly, you're going to find it hard to move? Or are you kind of, you think they're going to do well right from the off?
No, I think they'll do well. I think they've got good... They've got good fixtures there. I originally had a Marty in my team instead of Tsimikas, but I was just looking at, don't look a gift horse in the mouth. I mean, if he looks, what was we saying, 95% certain he's going to start Liverpool backline? I think, say they keep a couple of clean sheets that time, we're looking at some nice little points all there. Salah captain, Alexander-Arnold, and Tsimikas. I think that would be, it's a good strategy. And as I said, I'm not locked into it. That's another, not mistake, but I see that a lot in comments. Like, who's going to? I see this question: who's going to score more all season? Who cares? Who cares who's going to score more all season?
It's about blocks, isn't it?
Yeah,
blocks of fixtures.
I look at it. Who's going to score more in 4 weeks? Yeah. Who's going to score more in the next 4 weeks? And that's what I'm looking at. The last outfield player I had all season, didn't take them out once, was Darren Bent when he was at Sunderland. That's how long ago. And I think he's the only one at that stage as well. Goalkeepers maybe. But if I get Tsimikas in, and I've at that stage, I'm locked into a 4.0 defender. I don't think I'm locked into a Liverpool defender so much. Jota's good, but is he nailed on? Firmino's going to be back up and running. He already is up and running, really, isn't he? So do I want
last pre-season for me?
Yeah. Do I want another rotation risk in my side? And I think Jota could be it. And that's what I've come down to.
Well, interesting you say that, because I mean the player here that raised my eyebrows is Greenwood, and I'm seeing him come. He's entering into a few different teams now. I think obviously Sancho might not be fit to start the season. Cavani's self-isolating. I think Rashford's out. There's talks that Martial's going to start up front, and we don't really know what's going to be happening in that. Greenwood, to me, is a rotation risk. I think he's likely to share minutes with Cavani up front. I think Sancho's going to nail down that right wing spot. So you talk about Jota being a rotation risk. Do you not fear that with Greenwood as well?
No, because I like his price as well. I think it's a good fixture. I think even if he gets 20 minutes, so a bit like Jota, if he gets 20 minutes, could do some damage there. I think we'll be looking at Martial. Is he going to last all 90 minutes? Does he ever really? I need to look into that, but nevertheless, there's options there. It's likely to be initially Greenwood, Martial, and possibly Sancho. I was reading some reports that Sancho might be thrown straight in. Rashford's out of the picture, so is Cavani for a few weeks.
Well, we could see Dan James come in, I guess, potentially.
Is Dan James top boy? Is Dan James, in Solskjaer's mind, the better option to Greenwood?
Well, I don't think he is, but it depends. No. It depends where Greenwood plays. Like if he puts Greenwood up front, for example,
this is what's happening.
It could be Dan James on the right.
How do you know we've got a few days left of deadline? The conversations are happening about Dan James. I don't even want to talk about Dan James. I don't care about him. It's not in my thoughts. The other reason is Greenwood is price points. So Jota was in there. Now I've moved to Greenwood, but Gundogan could be in there. Ferran Torres could be in there. I might even move down to Rafinha, who's a player that I've always had my eye on for this spot anyway, in which case I've suddenly got $1 million in the bank and I can make some upgrades elsewhere. But I do like currently that sort of 7 million-ish midfield place. Yeah. And I think I can move around with that, but I might end up keeping Greenwood. So, going back to those fixtures, game weeks 1 to 4, Manchester United, Leeds at home, Southampton away, Wolves away, Newcastle at home. These are great fixtures. And so I look at Greenwood and I think, well, if he starts, if he's a sub, he could do damage. He's essentially a striker.
That's my concern with Greenwood.
In midfield, though.
Yeah, my concern with Greenwood is you've got him and you run a gauntlet with him of the fixtures are really nice, I'm going to start him, and he just keeps getting 20, 30 minutes. I think game week 1, I would bet quite a lot of money on him starting. I think he will more than likely play up front with Martial on the left, and I think Sancho might even start on the right.
Greenwood and Jota. So for example, if I didn't have Tsimikas and I had a Marty instead, I might go back to Jota, because Jota and Greenwood, yes, they may start, they may not start, but if they get 20 minutes, I'm happy.
Are you though? Are you? You're happy with 20 minutes from Greenwood? I don't believe you.
Did you own Jota in the last, when he came on in 20 minutes and scored a brace?
Yeah,
Have you owned Greenwood during his sub appearances?
But then you're talking about other options like 6-5 options who you're going to get 90 from, who are surely better. Rafinha is a great example. I mean, if you're offering me a 20-minute Greenwood or a 90-minute Rafinha, there's no contest for me.
If though you look at the fixtures, we've got no form to go on.
No.
we can think we've got form, but we haven't. There is no form. Yeah, it hasn't even started. So all we've got is fixtures. So you've got to go with the fixtures. So with Greenwood, he's 7.5. I've got tons of alternatives, many that are cheaper, like Rafinha or Harrison from Leeds. So I look at Greenwood and I look at the first thing I see with Greenwood isn't the name Greenwood, is it says to me 7.5 million. And so that's what I'm talking about the price points at this stage. See, I don't rule out getting a City midfielder like Gundogan or Torres, who could possibly be playing up front. I don't rule that out at all. And it goes back to that point about what Tom Freeman was saying about, is to have that sort of fourth midfielder to play around with. And I actually feel quite secure with Harvey Barnes, even though he could be a rotation risk. But I just, at the moment, there's something about the way he's been playing in pre-season, the way that Rodgers is setting up with him out there on the wing rather than, two up front. And says to me that he's sort of more safe. But Greenwood, yeah, he's the risky one. But use your fourth midfield spot as the risky one, not your captaincy. I haven't got the captaincy on Greenwood. It's not like make or break. And then I've got Ben White on the bench to come on first sub against Brentford. So if Toney fails and Ben White gets a clean sheet, well, that's quite nice.
Yeah, I mean, I see people's benches who are weaker than yours, and I kind of feel like, why? Like your bench isn't exactly loaded with expensive options. You've got 2, 4, 5. You've got 3, 4, 5 players, and I think we can do that. And I think if you've got Tsimikas, you kind of need that, because we know that he's going to be probably out of the team after the international break in 3. So I think if you are going with him, I think you need to have 2, 4, 5 defenders on your bench. I mean, Amity is someone who I'm interested in. I think he could be someone that, I mean, there's Vestergaard, links with Vestergaard and Leicester. But I mean, he played so well in that Community Shield game. I wonder if he could be a slightly more long-term option. But it's Tsimikas for me for the first 3 for sure.
Yeah, I mean, and that's the reason I'm going with the bench like that. If I've got a 4 million defender, I don't want 2 4 million defenders. So, for example, I've got Luke Ayling on my bench. Leeds play Burnley game week 3. Strong clean sheet potential there. And then moving up, as I said, Leeds suddenly become the second best team to Norwich, that is, from game week 5 over the next 8. They got Newcastle, West Ham, Watford, Southampton, Wolves, Norwich. I mean, just that block from 5 to 10, I would probably play Luke Ayling, although I'm probably going to be wildcarding then anyway. But as I said, Luke Ayling, I think, is just, you never know with Leeds. I think they're going to concede here for the first fixture, but in the better fixtures, when they can dominate more, I think, good option. Once again, he's not nailed, but I want a Luke Ayling figure, a 4.5. Once again, I'm looking at these players, I'm thinking 4.5 rather than Luke Ayling.
He covers Tsimikas quite nicely as well, because he has Burnley in the week that Liverpool have Chelsea.
Exactly.
So the week you don't really want to play him, you play Ayling. I came to exactly the same conclusion.
Yeah.
Just a quick note, we've got 1,279 people watching this live.
Hello.
Which is... Hi, everyone.
1,279.
Yeah, which is massive.
Wow.
I think it's the most I've seen for any video. You can tell that the season is drawing near when you've got that many numbers. So yeah, hi everyone, and thanks for tuning in. You mentioned Fernandes, so just the final player I'll talk about. I don't think we need to talk too much about Salah. It's pretty obvious. You did the captaincy video on him as well, so everyone can watch that and see how much you rate him.
Yeah.
Fernandes though, so I think we're now seeing everyone flocking back to Fernandes. I think there was a bit of a time where people were trying to make a case of going without him.
Yeah.
I think now we're seeing less people going for Son. Mahrez put in a pretty poor performance. Lukaku signing, so Havertz is less attractive to people. Was there ever a time when you took Fernandes out?
Yeah, last week. I've been playing around with this a bit. I had a sort of 3-5-2 with Mahrez and Son, and I quite like the look of that. But then Fernandes reminded me about Fernandes in the friendly at the weekend against Everton, free kick in. See, that would have been 5 points. What he was looking like and doing anyway probably would have been 2 to 3 bonus. You're looking at 9 to 10 points in FPL terms already. And that's just with a free kick.
Yeah.
So imagine if he then gets a couple of assists as well. I had a look at minutes per expected goal involvement for last season. Top, Salah. That's why I've got the armband on him. And Fernandes, just second. Minutes per XGI was 120 minutes. So, you should be getting that every 1 and a bit matches, really. Some kind of goal involvement. That's huge. And so these are the two guys I'm going to rely on for the captaincy in the first 4 game weeks, and then I'm going to start looking to see where we're at and consider a wild card. But the other reason is Fernandes' price, 12 million. And I noticed this on the Scoutcast. Andy had Mane in that role, and I think that's a really good move as well. I think if you're going to go without Fernandes, go for someone like Mane, who's got a good fixture and has been excelling in pre-season. So
the price point, right?
And it's the price point. And what I liked about Fernandes, so we mentioned Lukaku. I'm going to want Lukaku, if he's the main man up top with Chelsea, and he's now amazing, I'm going to want him, especially from game week 7. How am I going to afford that? Well, I need to have money invested in one player. I couldn't. So when I had the Mahrez and Son, it was spreading the money too thinly everywhere around my team. And while the team looked quite good for 1 or 2 weeks, it wasn't very flexible. And so I think Fernandes is a really good player to have, because I'm not totally invested in having him long term, but I am very keen to use his money. Or if he ends up getting double-digit scores every week, well, I'm not going to complain. I'm just going to keep him.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I've always felt like that. I think I briefly flirted with the idea of going for Sancho, and then I just couldn't really see how I could use the money other than getting a slightly better defence. And I think like we talk about players like Barnes and Greenwood and Rafinha and Grealish I'd put in that bracket as well at 8. I think there's just enough of these mid-price options I can afford and still have Fernandes. So
it's worth mentioning, though, that I know that I'm captaining Salah, and I know that I'm not going to deviate from that, and I haven't from June the 22nd. But I also know that I'm probably wrong, because Milner's going to be in the side, probably in midfield. And as far as I can tell, Milner's still on penalties. So if Liverpool get a penalty, it's going to be Milner, not Salah, taking it, my captain. Also, Salah scored nothing in pre-season. He hasn't done anything.
No, Mane's been...
Whereas it has been Mane. But my understanding was that last pre-season was very similar. And then he scored a hat-trick in game week 1. Yeah. So it's that fear, but it's not fear of missing out. It's fear of his points. It's like the fear of missing out links with everyone else getting his points. I don't have that fear. I have the fear of just me missing his points, because I think he could get a big haul. But I wonder if Fernandes is actually the better captain.
Ooh.
Or Mane.
Well, they could well turn out to be, but would you risk it?
Fernandes is my vice captain. I'm not going to, as I said, I have not deviated since June the 22nd from Salah as my captain. And I haven't done that sort of out of belligerency. I've just done that because I really want to get the player that I think is going to score the most points. But I do have this nagging down at the back of my mind. We're going to see a lot of people, Manchester United fans in particular, captain Fernandes, and I just wonder whether they might be right against a Leeds side, which, let's face it, they're pretty porous at the back.
Yeah, I think
the big sides.
I think this is one of those weeks which is just like, it's just overwhelmingly in favour of one player. And, I think people got burnt last year when they tried to be a bit different, because I think last year it was similar. There was Aubameyang, wasn't there, and Salah.
Yeah,
and
I captain Aubameyang.
Yeah, and they both had good fixtures, and the people who tried to be a bit different got burnt. So I think that does play on people's minds. I have to say though, I would be absolutely amazed if Milner took a penalty over Salah at this point now, given how Salah's been on them, when Milner's been out of the team. I just think the goal scoring records for Salah are there. He wants to hit as many as possible. Milner's going to be a bit part. I still think Salah would take the penalty. But yeah, I could be wrong. And if Milner imagine Milner does play instead of Tsimikas at left back and scores a penalty, it'd be absolute carnage, wouldn't it, on Saturday?
Well, that's it. I mean, luckily I've got a friend staying on Saturday, so I'm going to be busy, and I'm going to take a leaf out of people like what the FPL General has said and sort
switch
of
off.
Switch off. I'm not going to completely switch off. I might, have the occasional glance, but I'm not going to be that heavily involved or invested. So yeah, say that match, Milner steps up, takes the penalty, and Salah walks actually blanks in it. Yeah, there will be an eruption. There'll be a volcanic eruption of FPL managers. And so, I'm going to stay out of that.
Yeah, no, don't blame me. I will be doing the complete opposite and watching absolutely every second of everything I possibly can, which isn't healthy. And I would probably prefer to do your thing. But yeah, here we go. I think next week, Mark and I are going to try and do a Match of the Day challenge and then stream us watching Match of the Day. So we'll see how that goes. That's taking a leaf out of John's book.
Wow.
Yeah, it'd be interesting. Up front, so again, Antonio Ings. Let's not go into too much about them. Everyone kind of knows what they're about. I'm guessing you switched from Watkins to Ings when he made the move, like a lot of people did.
Yeah. As soon as he made the move, I just looked at that and I thought, well, I at that stage I did have 0.5 to spare, and I just quickly made that move because Danny Ings is the main man there. Watkins is a great option, but he played on the wing for Brentford, so he's probably going to do that again, or he's maybe play up front. But either way, it's going to be Ings. I think it was El Ghazi took the penalty.
He did,
though, over Ings. But if El Ghazi's not on the pitch, which he probably will be, I think at the start, but if he's not on the pitch, you would think it's possibly Ings. And just a bit about Antonio, though. So I mentioned expected, minutes per expected goal involvement. So we got the likes of Salah, Fernandes. It was actually Gareth Bale was third, which would be is a great pub quiz question for fantasy nerds like ourselves. Then there's Vardy, Iheanacho, then Antonio. So he's the sixth best, or if Bale's not here, the fifth best. So that's why Antonio is there. I just think he is absolutely brilliant if fit, and I really really wanted him. I've flirted with Callum Wilson.
Me too.
I think I wouldn't have Antonio and Wilson because of the hamstring issues, but I would have one of them. And at the moment, Antonio has the edge. Ings has the edge over Watkins. So that's why they're there. Also, what started to appeal to me with that structure, thinking about strikers, so say I wanted to get Lukaku without a wild card. Say I wanted to do it in 2 moves with a free transfer or even 1 hit, or as part of a sort of a mini wild card involving 3. Well, Ings and another player there. So if I'm up to 8 million with Ings, I think he might go up. Lukaku's like 3 or 4 million off there. That's why I've got Fernandes. So Fernandes can go down to like a 7.5 or 8 million. And I can bolster Ings to a Lukaku there. So he's sort of there for a bit of flexibility. And Toney is there because I also like his price, 6.5. Reasons, he could end up being a Pookie or Bamford. He could be an Ebanks Blade. But one thing I like about him is, say, Abraham is 6.5, might go to Arsenal. Now, if he is nailed on as the Arsenal striker, then I'm very keen. So also I noticed that Southampton's new Armstrong. New striker.
Don't sign the wrong one if you're looking to put a new team.
The great reverse Shearer of moving from Newcastle, Blackburn to Southampton. So Armstrong is the player that could be. So Southampton have a good run. When they have a good run, they're the sort of team where I'm not interested in the attackers in a bad run. I am in a good run, apart from Danny Ings. I could be interested there as well. And also it allows the flexibility of perhaps moving down, freeing up a couple of million, moving to a 3-5-2. Yep. Perhaps Brownhill, who is currently my playing midfielder, who's cheap, he can be moved with 1 million to Smith Rowe. He could be moved with 2 million to Rafinha, 1.5 million to Harrison. So you saw what I mean? It's that theme emerging. It's not necessarily the players, it's how much they cost and what I can do with them and how I can run away from them. Yeah. I keep saying I genuinely start off with the idea that I'm wrong. And I'm aware, and if I'm right about this team, then happy days. But I do think I'm wrong because I haven't won the lottery yet. So I'm not that lucky.
So you're giving yourself ways out. Essentially.
Yeah. Can I run away from them? And if someone's watching this and their team has got 4.0 defenders in it, can you run away from them? Ask yourself those questions. If you have got 2 4.5 midfielders and a 4.5 striker as well, if your spread of funds is like that and you can't really run away from those players, then it might be a chance to think, well, can I spend a little bit more there in order to get up to another player or to get them into a price point, like, for example, the 6 million midfielder category, because there's some really good options there. And I haven't even mentioned Sarr from Watford, who is also in my thoughts, and he was in my original draft back in June. So he is another great option, I think.
You can't run away from a Loftus-Cheek, I believe.
Can't run away from
Loftus-Cheek. Yeah, I mean, just to touch a little bit more on Toney from my side, because I agree with everything you're saying there. I think it's the reason why 3-4-3 is the preferred option if ever I can do it. Mainly because if I take Toney out and I put another midfielder in the spot, it means my 4.5 bench option is the likes of Keenan Davis or Obafemi or someone who I'm not going to get any minutes from, essentially. Whereas at least with a Brownhill or a Gilmore, someone like that, you know you're going to get at least some appearance points from them. And then if you've got Tsimikas as well, suddenly you're looking at 2 potentially non-playing players after 2 or 3 weeks, and that's the issue. I think the chat's interesting because a lot of people in the chat are saying that they've got basically your team, identical team to you, but it's quite split on Toney. And I do wonder with Toney, you know, about 3/4 of the way through the season, we look back at our game week 1 teams and we go, okay, what went wrong? And I think Tsimikas could be someone that we go, oh my God, what was I thinking starting him? Milner played all 3 games. I mean, you could potentially have it with Greenwood, but like I said, I think you're good for a couple of starts to him at least. But I think Toney could be someone who, I mean, he's 30% owned. His fixtures at the start are Arsenal, Palace, okay, quite tough, but then Villa, Brighton, Wolves, and then he goes into Liverpool, West Ham, Chelsea, Leicester. So, you know, so say you're going up to game week 7 where you're thinking of wildcarding, the only 2 games that I really like out of those 7 are Wolves away and Crystal Palace away.
Oh, I'd be wildcarding before game week 7.
Right.
Game week 7 would be because I'd want to be getting on the Chelsea change. And also, I'll have sort of been done with Fernandes by then, potentially. So I think I'm looking at a few fixtures. But yeah, I think Toney's worth a punt. I've often done this as well. I was looking back, actually, the third striker spot and the cheap strikers I've quite enjoyed. And that was probably because when I first started playing, Wigan had Zaki. Remember him?
I do.
And it was like, who's Zaki? Well, he's that guy who just keeps scoring.
Unbelievable pre-season. There was so much hype, wasn't there?
Yeah. And he was worth it. So often they are, if they're doing okay in pre-season. And Toney was out with a precautionary injury. So, you know, as a precaution, but he is a player that I think has looked impressive. He is the talisman there. If it doesn't work out, that's the thing. It's like, I think if you're sitting there like me with Toney in your team, don't think, oh my God, I'm locked in with this guy who's going to plummet in price for 38 game weeks. Just move him on. And fill your team with players that you probably won't move on. So for example, your Alexander-Arnolds, your Ben Whites, Harvey Barnes. I mean, these are. I think these are quite reliable, nice, easy, dull players. But I think it leaves you room to go for a sword. You know, you've got your shields and goes for a sword like Toney. Although he, in terms of ownership, he's in 30% of teams. So on the flip side, he does really well and he scores a goal, maybe 2 against Arsenal. That's not out but down the realms of reason. He's 30% owned. And a lot of those are going to be so-called casual managers, and also a lot of them are going to be engaged managers who are looking at the talisman theory around him. So I think he is a good option to start with. If it's wrong, he's a good one to move. But if he does anything in that Arsenal game, his price will shoot up. It always does. Always does.
It's the Palace game in 2, isn't it? I mean, all he's got to do is look quite lively in the first game, and then you're holding him for that Palace game.
And he always does look lively as well. And he's full of confidence as well. And he's said various things in interviews, like Bamford did, around directed to his fantasy football managers.
Well, that always impressive. I mean, look at Bamford. I mean, Bamford was fantastic. That was in his press conferences. Yeah, I have to be honest though. I mean, you make some great points there. I'm moving away from Toney actually. I'm concerned that the fixtures aren't as good as maybe I thought. No. I'm moving. I think he's the same price as Rafinha. And Rafinha's had a year in the Premier League, and the potential is there for massive hauls. So I'm actually looking at swapping Toney out for Rafinha. So that's going to be one of my traditional last couple of days moves that always backfires, and Toney hits a hat trick against Arsenal.
Well, yeah, I mean, he could, he might not, he might do well, but I just think I don't think you can go wrong there because of his price and because there are other options.
It's not going to ruin your season going for Toney at 6.5. You've got to put him in the context of other things, right? You're allowed to have a couple of players who are a little bit of a risk, but the core of your side, I mean, the core of your side with Antonio, Ings, Barnes, Fernandes, Salah, Trent, Shaw, like it's a strong side, and that is why the template is so strong this year, because those players are good players with good fixtures who should do well.
That's it. The template on Twitter, on Fantasy Football Scout, these are people who look at the statistics, pre-season minutes. It's a template for a reason. You're not going to, well, you are this week, suddenly, people are going mad, but usually over the summer, you're not going to see really unusual choices. Oh, I'm just going to get that guy who's never scored. I think now is Nathan Redmond's time.
Yeah, exactly.
You're not really seeing that. I've seen the odd ones saying,
Pepe is an example of someone who I've seen in a couple of teams, someone who's trying to be a bit different and predict a return for someone.
I don't mind the Pepe one.
No, it's all right. It's all right.
Do you know what? And I'm okay. So in terms of Greenwood, the Greenwood place, because I think we can home in on that one. Pepe is someone else who's also been in my thoughts, because I have thought he's looked much better for Arsenal, settled in now, and Dele Alli, who was my differential on the Scoutcast, and I think he's looked great. And if you're not going to get Son, and if you're not sure who's going to be the striker, then get the number 10 with the dreads and the fascinating chat about toothpaste. Get him in.
No, I completely agree. Right, Joe, I think we've done nearly an hour. We've nearly hit 1,500 live viewers. Ooh. So absolutely amazing. I've got a couple of things to give a shout out to. I don't know if you've ever played Fantasy 5. It's the free game where you can win 10 grand by picking... you basically pick players and they earn fantasy points. And if they earn more than their fantasy target and you've picked them, then you win 10 grand. So they're partnered with Scout this year. As I said, it's a free game, so you might as well play it. There's nothing to lose, and you could win 10 grand. And there's some like weekly and annual prizes as well. If you are interested in that, I did a video on this on the channel, just with an introduction and explaining the rules and that kind of thing. And I'll be doing that each week. And a final plug for the Fantasy Football Scout membership. If you haven't signed up yet, now's the best time to do it. The discount is going to be ending soon. It's just 20 quid for the year. Premium members, articles, all the tools, stats tables. We've got the new transfer planner, which we're rolling out. If you're still waiting for that, apologies. This rollout's a little bit slower than I thought, just because we had about 2,500 people request it. So it's taken a bit of time. But head over to the site. There's a link in the description as well. But Joe, thank you so much for joining me. And everyone can check you out on the Scoutcast, which will be going back to Tuesday nights from next week. Yes. And the captaincy video as well, which I'm doing with the new David, which is Tom.
Yep. And that was very well. We gave some options for people who are daring to be different and move away from Salah. But there are, someone's going to do well. They're going to nail the captaincy each week, and it may not be those that got Salah.
Absolutely. If you can be brave, you might even get featured on the Scoutcast. How about that?